Religious science is a spiritual philosophy founded by Ernest Holmes in 1927. Religious science is also commonly known as the science of mind. This teaching is a spiritual philosophy that blends science, religion, and philosophy into a unified framework. It's not a religion in the traditional sense, but rather a teaching about how spiritual laws operate and how we can consciously work with them to shape our lives. At its core, religious science centers on the power of thought to influence reality. It teaches that God, or infinite intelligence, is present within all life. There is no separation. We are each individualized expressions of that infinite presence. A key practice within religious science is affirmative prayer, also known as spiritual mind treatment. This is a process of consciously aligning our thoughts with spiritual truth, declaring the desired outcome from a place of knowing that the law responds to our word. The teachings emphasize that the creative process works through thought. Our beliefs are seeds planted in universal law, and the law returns those beliefs as corresponding experiences in our lives. Religious science is ultimately about conscious creation, understanding the mechanics of how the universe works, and learning to participate in that process intentionally rather than by default. This slide explores the historical roots of both religion and science, helping to frame how humanity has attempted to understand the forces of life from the very beginning. Early religion was deeply rooted in nature worship and animism. Our ancestors explained the forces of nature by attributing them to spirits and deities. Rituals, myths, and ceremonies weren't just cultural traditions, they were vital for survival and for finding meaning in an often unpredictable world. These shared beliefs help to strengthen community bonds and create a sense of connection to the unseen forces that influence daily life. Over time, this reliance on spiritual explanations began to shift. Observation of patterns in nature, like the seasons, the movement of the stars, and cause and effect relationships in daily life led to the development of prediction and problem solving. Practical needs such as agriculture, navigation, and medicine drove early humans to begin systematizing their observations. This is where the roots of science emerged, from curiosity evolving into systematic inquiry. Early mathematics and astronomy grew out of this need to understand and navigate the physical world. The transition from explaining the world purely through spiritual beliefs to exploring it through systematic observation is part of the human story. This slide introduces the key pioneers of the New Thought movement, individuals whose teachings laid the foundation for much of what we understand today about metaphysical law, mind science, and spiritual healing. Phineas Parkhurst Quimby is often recognized as the pioneer of mind healing and is widely regarded as the father of the New Thought movement. His work demonstrated that mental patterns and beliefs could directly influence physical health and life circumstances. Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, expanded on these ideas by emphasizing spiritual healing through an understanding of the divine mind. Her work introduced spiritual principles into a more formalized system of healing and spiritual practice. Curtis Hopkins, often referred to as the teacher of teachers, played a pivotal role in bridging various metaphysical traditions into organized movements. Many of the leaders who would go on to shape modern New Thought studied directly under her guidance. Myrtle Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, was a powerful voice for healing through affirmative prayer and the power of positive thinking. Her teachings continue to influence Unity's spiritual approach today. And finally, Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science and the science of mind philosophy, synthesized the principles of science, philosophy, and spirituality into cohesive, practical teaching. His work provides much of the framework that this presentation is based upon. These individuals form the roots of the New Thought movement, a lineage of spiritual understanding that emphasizes the power of the mind, the creative process, and the direct relationship between thought and experience. In the first chapter of The Science of Mind, The Thing Itself, Ernest Holmes asks the fundamental question: what is God? This question forms the foundation for understanding how spiritual law operates. God, represented by the circle, is infinite intelligence, the universal spirit, the source of all creation. It is not a being separate from us, but the very presence and power that underlies all existence. God is the creative energy, the intelligence, and the consciousness that permeates everything, seen and unseen. God is all-powerful, all-present, and all-knowing. It is an infinite presence, operating everywhere and through everything. It's important to understand that God is impersonal in the sense that it operates through law, yet God becomes personal to each of us as we recognize and align with it. God is the first cause, the unmoved mover, the origin of everything that exists. From this first cause, all form, all experience, and all creation arises. We can also think of God in terms of its qualities. God is love, God is truth, God is life, and God is beauty. These are not just poetic attributes, they are the very nature of the divine expressed in form. God is everything, the visible and the invisible, the seen and the unseen. Nothing exists outside of God, and most importantly, God operates through the law, the same law that this teaching is built upon. The law responds to thought, creating according to the patterns of belief we hold. This is how the infinite becomes specific, how the universal becomes personal in our individual lives. In the second chapter of The Science of Mind, The Way It Works, Ernest Holmes addresses the question, who are we? This is a foundational question in metaphysical teaching, represented by a circle divided into 3 parts. We are individualized expressions of the infinite. Each one of us is a spiritual being, made of the same divine intelligence that creates and sustains the entire universe. We are not separate from God. Rather, we are unique centers of awareness within the universal mind. Spirit operates through each of us. We are spiritual beings functioning through the mechanics of mind and law. This means that our thoughts, conscious or unconscious, are always interacting with the creative medium, which responds to them by producing form and experience. Our true nature is composed of spirit, soul, and body. Spirit is the conscious creative aspect, the chooser, the initiator. Soul, or the law, is the creative medium that receives the impression of thought and produces form. Body represents the physical manifestation, the outward expression of what has been created through the inner process. We are not separate from God, but rather individualized expressions of the divine. This means that we have access to the same creative power that governs the universe. However, this power works according to law. Our thoughts impress the law, and the law produces our reality in direct correspondence with those thoughts and beliefs. The universe doesn't respond to what we wish for, it responds to what we believe. We are co-creators in a lawful, intelligent universe, and whether we are conscious of it or not, we are always using this creative power. Understanding who we are as spiritual beings operating within this framework of mind and law is essential to consciously participating in the creative process and shaping our experience of life. In the 3rd chapter of The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes explains what it does, how the creative process operates within the framework of spiritual law. In this slide, I cover this material from that same foundational perspective, while also introducing an additional symbol, the yin and yang, to visually represent the circular nature of the law of cause and effect. While Holmes did not use this symbol, I find it to be an effective way to illustrate the balance, polarity, and unbroken flow inherent in the creative process. The law is circular in nature. This means that thought, when impressed upon the law, cycles back as form or experience, which then becomes a new input for further thought. It is a continuous self-sustaining process, an infinite loop of cause creating effect, and effect becoming the seed for new cause. The law is impersonal. It doesn't judge, discriminate, or decide whether something is good or bad. It simply acts upon the mental equivalent we give it. The law is mechanical in this sense, completely reliable, always functioning according to principle, not opinion. And the law is always at work. Whether we are conscious of it or not, whether our thoughts are intentional or random, the law receives them all the same and produces corresponding outcomes. This is a key point. We are always using the law, consciously or unconsciously. The choice is whether we become intentional participants in that process. In addition to the law of cause and effect itself, this slide also touches on related spiritual laws, which operate within the same framework, including the law of mental equivalence, the law of circulation, the law of attraction, and the law of resonance. These are all expressions of the same universal principles. Even Newton's 3rd law, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and the concept of synchronicity aligns with this truth. Understanding what it does is about recognizing that we live in a lawful universe, a universe that is intelligent, orderly, and creative, and that we are active participants within that system. Our thought set causes in motion, and the law returns the results. It is an unbroken cycle, perfectly reliable, and always expressing the patterns we provide. The content of this slide is based on the 4th chapter of The Science of Mind, titled How to Use It. I cover this material from that same perspective, while also drawing on the meaning embedded in the religious science teaching symbol, the diagram that visually represents how the creative process unfolds through spirit, law, and form. covering essential concepts like working at the level of spirit and spiritual practices that help focus and direct this process. Practices such as meditation, visioning, journaling, sacred study, gratitude, forgiveness, and of course, spiritual mind treatment. First, we must know that God is everything, the infinite presence that expresses as all life, including us. This isn't about a distant deity. It's about recognizing that the creative intelligence of the universe is present within our own being. Second, we recognize that we are one with God, that there is no separation between us and the source. What God is, we are in essence. This understanding is foundational because it establishes our direct relationship with the creative process. From that awareness, we then declare our word, an intentional statement of truth made from the recognition of our unity with the divine. This is not begging or hoping. It is a statement that, through the law, establishes cause and must produce a corresponding effect. The law does not respond to idle wishes. It responds to belief. When we believe, when we know that our word is backed by the creative intelligence of the universe, it is already true in the mind of God. From that moment, the law is at work bringing it into form. This is the process that the religious science teaching symbol represents. The top section symbolizes spirit, pure intelligence, and intention. The middle section symbolizes law, the creative medium that acts upon thought, and the bottom represents form, the visible result. Our role is to consciously use this process, impressing the law with clarity and conviction, knowing it will produce the equivalent in our lived experience. This slide represents how the creative process functions as a lawful mechanism for turning thought into form. This content is illustrated through two diagrams that work together to show both the metaphysical principles and the practical application of the law. The first diagram depicts how the law, symbolized here by the yin and yang, shines through what I describe as the prism of knowledge, faith, and belief. This prism filters our consciousness, directing the creative energy of the law into focused, intentional outcomes. This is how spiritual mind treatment works. The symbols on the right side of this diagram are directly drawn from the religious science teaching symbol, spirit, or God, unity, and action. You'll notice they are color-coded as red, green, and blue. This isn't arbitrary. These colors represent the color spectrum as light passes through a prism, symbolizing how pure spiritual potential becomes differentiated into specific outcomes based on the patterns we impress upon it. This is a visual metaphor for how infinite intelligence expresses through individualized consciousness. The second diagram, the cycle of creation schematic, shows how these symbols function as an operational mechanism. It illustrates the circular nature of the creative process, how thought, once planted in the creative medium, flows into form, then cycles back as new thought, perpetually sustaining the process of creation. This is how the law functions, continuously, reliably, and without judgment. The bullet points on the top half of the slide relate to the first diagram. They explain how the law operates according to our knowledge, faith, and belief, how we must know that God is everything, how we must remember that we are one with that creative source, and how, by stating our word, we set the law into motion. The bullet points on the bottom half of the slide correlate to the second diagram, the mechanical flow of creation. They explain how God, unity, law, and action work together as a cohesive mechanism. And then we arrive at the final critical principle, treat and move your feet. This is more than just a clever phrase, it's a spiritual imperative. Treatment or spiritual mind treatment is how we set the law into motion, mentally and spiritually. But moving your feet means we must also take grounded real-world action in alignment with our declared intention. The law works through our consciousness, but it also works through the channels of everyday life, through people, circumstances, opportunities, and actions. This is the complete cycle of creation, thought into form, form into experience, and experience back into thought. It is a lawful, repeatable process, and understanding this mechanism is central to consciously co-creating our lives. Now I'd like to introduce you to a book by Willow Frost, The Spiritual Law of Cause and Effect. This work is a guide to understanding the metaphysical principles that shape our reality, principles that are always at work, whether we're consciously aware of them or not. All the material in this presentation comes from that book. The book explores the spiritual law of cause and effect in depth. It blends both science and spirituality in a practical and approachable way, helping you understand how the unseen laws of the universe operate in your life. Throughout the book, Willow incorporates diagrams, models, and rich visual aids to help clarify concepts that are sometimes difficult to grasp purely through words. You'll learn how to consciously co-create with the universe rather than creating by default through unconscious beliefs or patterns. If this resonates with you, the book is available now on Amazon.com. I'd like to take a moment to share a bit about Willow Frost and her journey that led to this work. From a very young age, Willow has been drawn to the unseen forces of life, the deeper questions about how the universe works, why things happen the way they do, and how we as individuals fit into the greater pattern of existence. This curiosity led her to the teachings of the New Thought movement and eventually to a lifelong study of religious science, as articulated by Ernest Holmes. For more than 25 years, she has been deeply involved with Centers for Spiritual Living, where she engaged in formal coursework, spiritual practice, and service. She had the privilege of conducting lectures, workshops, and services, helping others explore and apply the principles of metaphysical law, spiritual psychology, and practical mysticism. But her background isn't solely spiritual. She is also an educated scientist. Her professional training in the sciences has given her a structured, analytical lens through which to approach spiritual principles. This fusion of science and spirituality has been central to how she understands and teaches the metaphysical laws that govern our reality. If you'd like to learn more about her professional background or connect further, you can visit her profile on LinkedIn.com. This blending of rigorous scientific thinking with deep spiritual inquiry is what defines the teachings in her book and the work that she shares. Her intention is always to present these principles in a way that is both intellectually sound and spiritually meaningful.